So, Amy, we started a new piece and you made the first move. So, why don't you give us a little history about Fathom?
So I was thinking about um, beauty. I was thinking about also how we measure things like time. We've been in a pandemic for months. We've been in a new version of space for a long time, but we also have been beyond what many of us, myself included, can imagine. And so I was thinking about the importance of stillness and the importance of a certain kind of sound in my life. And I'm always brought back to water. So all of those things converged and landed me at that image of the water with which I began our current piece, Fathom.
Do you think growing up in Syracuse near lakes and ponds and bodies of water in general, do you think that has any impact on your life or any impact on this piece?
For sure. I grew up outdoors. I grew up being an outdoor kid. I grew up in the country where across the street from the house I lived in as a kid, there was corn and cows. We had no across the street neighbors. So there was this view and there was corn and there was the smell of cows and there was an incredible vista that you could see every night for the sunset. I grew up near a lake and going to a lake many days of my summers. I grew up with access to a lot of water and a lot of remote places. So I'm always drawn to quiet. I'm drawn to alone. I'm drawn to water for sure. Most Januaries, when I can, I go to Provincetown, Massachusetts, because it's the tiny tip of the earth to me. And I go there because I can see the ocean at a time of year when the lighting is extraordinary, and I have the ocean to myself because it's really cold and it's really windy and there's nobody there. So the town is also really affordable. And yeah, I go to the water. You know, there's this great line in The Sound of Music, and Julie Andrews is climbing the Alps, and from the song, and it says, I go to the hills when my heart is lonely. I know I will hear what I've heard before. And that's really how I feel about the ocean and about water. I go to the water for answers. I go to the water to ask questions, and I go to the water just to be a little bit more connected to something that I don't always have a name for, but I'm pretty sure is bigger than me.
Yeah, the smell of cows. Don't miss that living in the city. But I think that is, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but it feels a little universal, the fact that people congregate towards water for peace or for stillness. There's something just really playful and calming, and I appreciate you taking that photograph and starting the piece with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that brings me to my next point of we started the piece really calmly. Everything seemed to, it's kind of like, it was, for me, it was like looking at a fish tank. And like you get to discover things as they start to grow and move. And I think all of our early pieces were very comforting and calming. And then towards the end, they picked up and it became chaotic and fruitful. So what was your, I guess, did you have that same reaction to it?
I think for me, I don't know if this is true for you. I kind of think maybe it is, but for me, no matter what art I'm making, whether it's for me or even for a client, sometimes there is some core of me that is always responding to my truth at the time. And even when it's subtle, and even when it's could be a slight shift in color or an angle or motion, there's always a part of me that has to funnel my world out through my artwork. It's sort of like a little kind of beacon of light that goes out through a hole into something bigger. So I, no doubt, during the Fathom piece, chaos was introduced, or a sense of disorder, or a different kind of order. because I'm always responding to the world. And, you know, our world, though we seek moments of peace and quiet and calm, and we literally seek those moments of the water, we don't live in a void. We don't live in a vacuum. And so I am a creature of my environment. I'm impacted by the world. I'm impacted by pain. I'm impacted by the suffering that we feel. I'm impacted by the search for truth and some kind of adherence to empathy as what I believe should be a code of conduct. So I'm impacted by all of that, and so I'm sure that filters its way through me into my work, because I can't not be that person. I don't have a way to block that. And I don't want to block it. I feel like art is the way to unblock. And so sometimes it means that work takes turns that you wouldn't see coming.
Yeah, I think, at least personally for me, and I'd love to hear your thought on this, out of the series that we've done so far, this was actually the hardest one for me.
Mhm.
I struggled tremendously trying to figure out what my next move was going to be.
Mhm.
And I felt like I couldn't see, and maybe this was to your point, like maybe this was just me going through something very personal, but I couldn't see through the weeds to see the end of the piece. And I think in previous pieces, I mean, they all took twists and turns, which is the great part about this. But I think this one in particular, I couldn't see a bigger vision. Like I felt like we were adding so many pieces to it. And it didn't become a whole until the last, I think, two moves. And I think that's something that I'd love to hear your opinion on. It's hard. It's hard to trust that things are going to come together. And I'm not trying to be like very Gandhi and make this a metaphor for life, but it's hard to be okay not being okay.
Yep.
But I think that's really important. And I think that is something I learned a lot about myself during this piece. Is I was very uncomfortable through most of my moves, and reacting to your moves. I couldn't get into it like I had all the other pieces. But there was something towards the end where, yes, it became very chaotic, but I then embraced it and I was like, okay, this is okay. And yeah, what's your reaction to that?
Totally. I get it. I totally agree with you. I feel it. I felt it. But here's the thing. There's this researcher, there's a woman whose research and writing I very much respect, and her name is Brene Brown. And she has a podcast.
Love Renee.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so she has a podcast where she talks about day two. And I highly recommend it if you haven't heard this, Sarah, because she talks about day two relative to our relationship to the pandemic and to this incredibly hard to predict and navigate world. So she talks about the fact that day one is the drama. Day one is the event. The pandemic hits, you know, the racial revolution hits. It's the energy, it's the adrenaline, right? It's the moment when everything is urgent and reactive and it's new on our fingertips and we're still trying to wrestle with all the parts, right? So that's day one. And people are alert and awake and alive in struggling, but in that sort of new sensory way, right? Very much driven by adrenaline. Day two, and this is what she talks about, which I am completely, we're in day two. You know, we're 7 months into the pandemic, but we're in day two. And day two is, now what? So all of that has happened. The adrenaline of day one has occurred. Day two is we are still in this fucked up shit show. And we have to keep going, and we don't have the answer. And there's no quick solution. There's no quick fix. There is no clear light at the end of the tunnel. There is just going forward or trying to go forward, right? And there's feeling around in the dark. And so if this were a movie, she says this is the part where the hero and the heroine would be like trying all these ways to get out of the elevator that they're trapped in, you know. Like, but this is where you try all your solutions, and you try this road and you try that road and you try meditation and you try to, you know, whatever you're trying, you try to do all the jigsaw puzzles they sell on the internet. But here we are, and we're still in the pandemic, and we are still in a world upside down, and we are still in day 2. And so that's how this piece felt to me, was a clear example of day 2, because there's no clear road. There was no clear vision for how it should look at the end. I knew where it started. I had no idea where it would go. And it felt awkward and uncomfortable, and it felt very much in keeping with how at least my life feels almost every day, which is I don't feel like I'm in my own skin a lot. I just know I'm in somebody's skin, and I show up and I try, but I don't recognize almost anything that I'm around the way I used to recognize and feel comfortable. And so I think this piece for me is a mirror of that experience. It's day 2, and maybe could be its other title. I think Fathom is a great title, but I think day 2 is really, for me, what it was built on.
Yeah. I'm glad you felt uncomfortable too. I felt like a failure most of my moves. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to put it out in the world. And I think my confidence level was not here for this piece, but I was delightfully surprised at the end, and I didn't know what else to do. And so that's why I kind of ended it on that very cool, like, path that you had created with that orange line. And I think it ended the piece beautifully. So, I mean, I'm really excited to keep doing this with you. Do you have anything else that you want to say about this piece?
I do. Just one final thing is that this piece is a testament to how much I think we trust each other, because sort of like throwing things up in the air and seeing where they landed back and forth. Like, you throw it up in the air, then I'll throw it up in the air, then you throw it up in the air. But I didn't have a clue what you would do with my move, and I certainly know that you didn't have a clue what I was going to do with your move. But I ultimately sort of think that we are gritty artistically, and one of the things I have always really liked about you is you have this stick with itness that I trust you to have. I know you're going to show up with it. I'm going to show up with it. I always return my move. You always return your move, and there's always something there to react to. And so I think this piece really tested that, and it showed some core strength to that design relationship that we have always had, but I think has gotten stronger over this series. And I think this piece is really one of the strongest pieces of evidence about it. So now I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done too. I'm really glad that piece is over. It was a feat of strength to get through, but I think it was really lovely at the end. I couldn't say anything better about it. I think it's gorgeously complex and simple at the exact same time. I still feel like it's I don't know, I have this weird infatuation with fish in fish tanks. And so, like, it felt to me the entire time like this is my view into the fish tank. And I think, yeah, like, it's a representation of my life, like how simple, how complex can it be, how calming it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be all of those things all at once. So thank you so much for all of your hard work, and I can't wait to continue.
I loved it. Really fun doing this with you, Sarah.
All right. Well, have a wonderful afternoon.
Talk to you soon, okay?
Bye.
Peace out.